Alright, so now we're going to talk a little bit about AJAX. Before we get into our coding, I just want to touch on what AJAX is and how it works. So AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And don't let that name throw you off. You don't need to know XML to use AJAX. In fact, JSON or JavaScript Object Notation is used much more with AJAX than XML is, at least at this time. So AJAX is used to update specific parts of a web page without reloading the whole page. And it works by exchanging small amounts of data with the server behind the scenes. Okay, so it can make HTTP requests without having to refresh the entire page. Alright, applications like Gmail, Google Maps. So let's take a quick look at how AJAX works. So it starts out with some kind of event, whether it's a page load, a button click, a form submit, whatever it may be. And a special object called an XMLHttpRequest Object is created. And that's basically the foundation of AJAX. And that'll send an HTTP request behind the scenes to the server. The server will then process it, it'll create a response, and then send it back to the browser. And then the browser will update the page accordingly. Alright, so the XMLHttpRequest Object is an API that provides client functionality for transferring data between a client and a server. And it's compatible with just about every version of every browser, and it gives us a behind-the-scenes way to transfer data. Alright, like I said before, it's not limited to XML. It can use JSON, it can use a file protocol, it can use FTP, and so on. So since the XMLHttpRequest Object is an object, it has properties and it has methods. Now I'm not going to go over all of these in depth, but some of the ones we'll be working with: onReady state change, which fires off when the ready state property changes. Response will return either an object or a document or a DOM string. Response text contains the request as pure text. Response type is an enumerated value that defines the type. What else? Status will give us either 200 if everything's okay, or 404 if there's some kind of page error. And then the rest of these timeout, we're not going to really get into that, but these are the properties that are available. Okay, we also have methods. We have abort, which will abort the current request, and we can set the request header with get response header. Open is used to initialize a request, and then send will obviously send the request. Okay, so we'll get into some of that in a little bit. So this is a simple example of how to create our XHR object. Alright, when I say XHR, I mean the XMLHttpRequest Object, which is kind of long to say. But we're just creating a variable here, and then we're checking to see if it's available at this window.xmlHttpRequest. Now, this should be true in all modern browsers. I think that IE6 is the last one that doesn't allow this. So if you want, you can also say else here, and then you need to use this new ActiveX object. This is for, like I said, IE5, IE6. It's not even, you don't even need to include this really, but basically to create it, we're going to take our variable and say new XMLHttpRequest, and that should create the object. So sending a request, we can use the open method, and then you're going to pass in what type of request. In this case, it's a GET request, and then the URL or the file name. In this case, it's just a text file. All right, and then to actually send it, you want to use .send. Now, GET and POST are two different requests that we can use. GET is faster, but it's much less secure and should only be used to do things like request data from a server. POST is used to do things like send data to the server, send user input, things like that. Alright, so a good example for a GET request would be a search form. Alright, you're not actually posting sensitive data to a server, you're just trying to receive some information based on your parameters. All right, a post would be used for something like a user registration form. So getting a response, this is just an example that I grabbed from the documentation. You can see that we're getting response XML, so it'll be an XML format. Down here we're just using some standard JavaScript to get elements by tag name. Alright, so basically that would look for any artist tag, and then we have a loop that's going to loop through and grab all the artists, and then down here put it into an element that has an ID of demo. Alright, and we'll do this in a little bit. Not this exact code, but something like it. Alright, so we also have events. We have onReadyState, and this stores a function to be called every time the ready state changes. Alright, so you have this ready state event, and it has 5 states. It has 0 through 4. So 0 is not initialized, 1 is when a connection is established, 2 is when the request is received, 3 is when it's processed, and then 4 is when it's finished. Alright, and then you also have a status, which will be 200 if everything's okay, and 404 if it's a page not found. Alright, so in our code we're going to want to test to see what state we're at. Okay, we're not going to want to move forward until we're at 4, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so let's jump into some code, and I can give you some examples. Alright guys, so we're going to jump in and just do a little bit of AJAX. And what I want to do is create a button, and then when we click that, I want to use the XHR object to basically make a request and then bring in a text file into a certain area in our page. So I have this index.html file, and I'm going to create another file alongside it called file.txt, and then we'll open that up, and I'm just going to say, we'll say this text is from the file.txt file. Save it and close it. Alright, so let's go back into our index page, and we're going to, let's see, create a button, and let's go ahead and add an on-click to that, and when it's clicked, let's say we have a function called change text. Alright, and then underneath it, actually let's go above it, we'll put an H1, and we'll say change this text. Okay, we'll put a line break here, save it, and that's what it should look like. Oh, we need to put some text in here. Okay, now in our script tags we're going to want to create a function called change text. Alright, now we're going to create our XHR object. So let's create a variable called XHttP. We're going to set it to new XMLHttpRequest. Alright, and then we can take that object, XHttP, and we're going to call the onReadyState change. Okay, onReadyState change, and let's set that to function, and then we're going to do an if statement. Okay, remember how it has different states? We want to check to make sure its ready state is equal to 4. So XHttP dot ready state is equal to 4, and we also want to check the status. Remember, the status, if everything's okay, should be 200. So we're going to say XHttP dot status equals 200. Okay, so when that's true, we know that everything's okay. And what we want to do is get the response text. So let's say console.log XHttP dot response text. Okay, now remember we have to run the open and then send. So down here, outside of the if, we're going to actually I want to be outside of this function, which ends here. So right here, we're going to say xhttp.open, and this is going to be a GET request, and then the URL or the file, the location is going to be file.txt, and then we're also going to set true. Alright, now that's the last thing we need to do is run send. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. And actually, you know, instead of the console log, I don't want to do that. I want to change the H1. So we'll say, let's see, let's put a ID on this H1. We'll just say main text. Alright, so down here we'll do document dot get element by ID main text dot inner HTML equals, and we're going to set it to that response text. Alright, so let's go ahead and save that and reload. If I click the button, let's see if we're getting any errors. Oh, since we're in Chrome and we're not on a web server or anything like that, it's just a file, it's giving us this error. Now you could upload it to something like an Apache server or something, but if you want, you can just use Firefox because they don't have this limitation. So I'm going to open up Firefox real quick, and let's go ahead and paste that in. And if I click change, now you can see we're getting this text is from file.txt. Alright, so that's how AJAX and the XHR method works, or the XHR object. Now I'm going to stop here, and in the next video we're going to continue on with this stuff. Instead of just getting text from a file, we're going to use the GitHub API, which is a JSON API service that we can use to get information from developers that are registered at GitHub and have profiles and repositories. Alright, so we will get into that next.